Hello everyone, welcome to Guru Squad. Today we're going to go ahead and look at GS RichCopy 360 and its ability to copy to Microsoft OneDrive Personal and Business, as well as SharePoint Online. They all use the same different setup, so we'll just go ahead and cover them in one demo. To copy to GS RichCopy, to copy to OneDrive Personal or Business or SharePoint Online, you have two different options. There's user authentication and app authorization. Now, if we go with user authentication, you have different advantages. First, it's easy. You do not need to have any special privileges besides getting access to the required resources, whether you're copying to your personal OneDrive or business OneDrive, or if you're copying to a document library on SharePoint Online, then you just need to have that access privilege. The only issue with setting up user authentication is you could potentially get throttled by Microsoft Office 365 if the cluster that you're copying to is under stress. So you probably want to try to minimize your copying if it's a lot of files to possibly maybe after hours. Definitely don't do it on Mondays because a lot of your Office 365 customers, they're checking emails from over the weekend and so forth. So usually those Office 365 clusters are under a lot of stress on Mondays, but preferably after hours or so forth, unless the job is small. User authentication goes with small to medium copy jobs. So if you've got files, 10,000, maybe 30,000 files or less, you're probably safe to go with user authentication. Now, if we look at app authorization requires you to be global admin. So if you work for a large enterprise and you've got only access to specific resources on SharePoint or so forth, you might not have the global admin privilege, at which point app authorization would not be an option. But with app authorization, you basically won't get throttled as much as you would with user authentication. So this is recommended for medium to large jobs. So now let's go ahead and create a demo. We'll just show you a demo how to copy to OneDrive Personal, Business, or SharePoint. First thing is you install GS RichCopy 360 on your machine. You could do it with Standard or Enterprise. For this demo, we're using Enterprise. Once it's created, we go to the Jobs tab. Right-click anywhere and say Create a New Job, or you can click on the New button right here. You're going to go to Expert Mode. This basically bypasses the wizard. However, the wizard does not have cloud options. So you always want to select the Expert Mode. For the job name, we're going to go ahead and type in, give it just a label. So this would be User Authentication Demo. The source, we're going to go ahead and select the folder that we've created with some dummy files called Data. And we're going to go ahead and select Cloud as our option. For the source, it could be a local path or it could be a file share that's local to you. So you could use a UNC path, for instance. So once we go to the select Cloud, we're going to click on the drop down, select OneDrive SharePoint. And it automatically switches to user authorization. We click on the Browse button. And that's going to ask you to log in. So this is a demo account that we've got. Ask you to put your password. And now it says that you've granted access using your user ID. So now we can see all the different available locations that this user has access to. For instance, for the sake of this example, I'm going to go ahead and copy to my personal OneDrive, or I could select the SharePoint. So as you can tell, it's all the different available options. Personal is fine, or SharePoint is fine. I'm going to go ahead and select OK. If you notice, you've got an access key here. So this basically tells you it has been authenticated and it will store that token for you. The next time you want to run another job, if you rerun that same job, you will not be required to do any authentication. If there was MFA attached to this user ID, then when the moment we logged in, we would have been prompted for the MFA authentication. And then at that point, it will store that token for you. So the next time you will not have to do that. This token is probably good for about 8 months to 1 year. If you rerun the job within that 1 year, then the token refreshes itself. Now, once you select that, you can go in and select whether you want to do a copy changes only, mirror, move, or so forth. One thing to point out, if you're copying to SharePoint, your file compare must be timestamp, date timestamp, as opposed to file size, and that's just because of a SharePoint limitation. If you don't know that, if you forget that option, and then when you click Save, it will actually notify you. So we can select if you want to copy locked files, you want to go ahead and mimic the same, get the same folder timestamp that we have in the source. And we're going to be using 4 threads. For cloud jobs, it's recommended that you do not use more than 8 threads, just because they do count multiple threads as they see that as causing threads pressure on the system. So what they will do is it will throttle you down. Anywhere between 4 and 8 is probably fine. So we're going to go ahead and keep it as 4. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Now the job has been created. So what I can do is I can right click on the job and say Start. And this is an example of the user authentication. The job is queued. I can click on here just to take a look at it. Right now it's enumerating. It found 30 files and it just started the copying process. If I look at it's getting to about 9 megabytes per second. So if you want to calculate it in megabits, that would be times 8. So if we say we had 10 megabytes per second, then that would be using 80 megabits per second, basically, because it's times 8. Cloud bandwidth, we're using, it's reported here. This is for all the cloud jobs. The job is completed successfully, and we are done. Now let's go ahead and do the app authentication method. We'll do the same process. Click and create a new job. Go to expert mode, give it a name, app authentication. I'm going to browse to where the location is. Now this time we're going to copy this to SharePoint. So what we do is we select Cloud, click on the drop down. We will be adding additional cloud providers as we move forward, so this video might not include all of them. But for this point, OneDrive SharePoint. And if I'm not going to use user authentication, I want to use app authentication. Click on it. I'm going to click on the plus sign. And now I give that job a name, or that user ID, app authentication a name. That was just an error because I clicked on browse before I clicked on app authentication. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and call it app authentication demo. Now what we need to do is we need to get the tenant ID. So you click on this button right here, and it will give us the tenant ID, and it will request for authentication. So I'm going to select the user ID, the user ID that has global admin access. And it's requesting that you give the application access to, so that it can read all your files and copy them and so forth. Click on accept. Now you will notice it will say tenant ID, and that's your tenant ID for our example here. This is our tenant ID. If your browser for some reason does not show the tenant ID in the browser here, you can find it from the URL. It will show tenant ID, and you want to copy that whole tenant ID to your clipboard. And then you can close this, come here and paste the tenant ID, and then you click on save. Once this is selected, you can click on browse, and you select where you want to copy it to. So we want to copy it to team site drive documents. Click OK. You can select the different options. For this time, I'm not going to select file compare timestamp just because I want to show the error. It tells you SharePoint does not allow you to detect file change. So you want to select that, and then you want to select modified timestamp. Click on save. Now we have app authentication selected. Right click on it and click on start. We can click on queued here, or we can click on show progress down here. It's connecting to the cloud. Starting the copying process. It's enumerating the files. We have 30 files for this example. You can see the progress here. And these are all the different, we selected 4 threads. So it's showing you basically every thread as it's copying. It's giving you an estimated time. Now, estimated time is sometimes accurate and sometimes it's not, especially when it comes to cloud, just because the cloud, there's a lot of variables in the bandwidth does fluctuate, and that obviously impacts the throughput. So now this is successful. And now our jobs have been completed. Now, one thing that's good about if you have multiple jobs that you want to run and you don't want to keep authenticating, what you can do is, whether you're doing with a user or app, you can right-click on a job and say copy job. It did copy the token for you. So now you can go ahead and click on browse, and you'll be able to browse the different locations that only use the same token, so you don't have to rerun the same job. Okay. So you can look at the status job, you can see how things are going, but this is basically how to copy files to OneDrive, whether you're using app authentication or user authorization. Hopefully this demo was informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing. Reach out to support@gurusquad.com if you do have any questions. Thanks.